so beginners and kayaks.
Schaefer Yaks.
Schaefer Yaks! Woo! Schaefer, yeah!
My first question for a beginner every single time, usually if they're wanting their first boat, is basically, how fit are they and how gung-ho are they, right? Like, are they really excited about kayaking and are they really athletic, or are they semi-athletic, have a desk job, trying to do something active for the first time in a while, right? Like, these are factors to what a beginner is going to need. And then you really need to know what their mindset is, right? Like, if you have a 12-year-old, for example, that, is on his like wrestling team or whatever, or a 16-year-old who's on a high school wrestling team or something like that, right? You're probably not going to start them in a big boat that protects them and makes them feel safe, right? So a lot of times who the person is determines what boat they're going to need. But then also the attitude about water, right? Like, some people are really afraid of water. So if they're going to be more timid about water, it doesn't matter if they're athletic or not, they need a confidence boost. Then you take that into consideration. Or if they just love water and you can't pull them out, take that into consideration, right? So like the general way that the lineups work is you have a playboat, right? Like, so I've got a playboat sitting next to me, and it's the Rockstar 5, which is not a big boat, right? I'm sitting in a chair, and it's
Very small boat. Yep.
It's a small, tiny boat, right? And so that's the small end of the scale. But then you have like the furthest end of the scale, you have like a full-on creek boat, which would be the Narvana, for example, right? So the Narvana would be the Jackson Kayak's most full-on creek boat. And creek boat is kind of like, the way to think about it is like a bomb shelter, right? Like a creek boat, when everything goes off and everything's like too big, you want a creek boat because then you feel safe and secure and you're a little bit protected. You have more volume, so you float higher, so you can stay above all of the things that are in the water. And so like that's what creek boats are designed to do. Even the rockered bow on a creek boat is designed to just float higher and higher and higher instead of diving down into things. Then you have like the half slices, which are more toward the playboating side of that river runner. So a half slice, would have the bow of a creek boat, and then like the antics, for example. Yep. And then you have like the quarter slices, like the Stees or something like that, right? Something that's mostly a creek boat with a little bit of slice.
But you can't really play in it very much.
Yeah, you're not really playing as much as you are creaking, but you're using the thin stern to do stuff. That's kind of
turns and
like pivot turns and things like that. You're learning to load that stern and get your bow up, and they're really fun to paddle. That style of boat is really fun to paddle. And so you have this entire range of boats, right? So the convention is that beginners need to be in a safe boat. So the convention is stick a beginner into a creek boat, because creek boats are safe, they're secure, they're that bomb shelter, right? So you put somebody in a creek boat and all of a sudden life's good. But the problem with a creek boat is that creek boats tend to do a lot of things really well for you. So they tend to mask mistakes. So if your hip mobility is not very good and your edge work's not very good, you can stay right over your boat and paddle really flat and kind of just spin when you turn instead of really carving a turn or edging a turn. And they also prevent you from naturally learning things like how to use quadrants. So, and I can talk about quadrants more in a moment. But basically, if you can imagine dividing like your boat in half, side to side and front to back, when you go to boof something, you're going to load one. in order to take a booth, right? So you're loading one corner of your boat instead of one side of your boat because your weight might be shifted back. So it's an advanced technique, but you don't learn it if you're paddling flat and you're in a big boat that kind of swallows you and protects you from everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfect sense.
Whereas,
actually.
yeah. Whereas like if you're a beginner, you're gonna say you're kind of worried about that edgy feeling of a kayak. And
Yep.
so that's the argument against it, is like, don't put them in something edgy, right? But what you have to learn as a beginner, the earlier you learn it, the better you progress, is how to use your edges. In a entry level beginner kayaking course, if I did a 1 hour course for total beginners, one of the very first things, aside from strokes and basic, turning strokes and corrections, is going to be how to lean, how to brace, how to carve a turn, right? Like there's some really basic key things that, we'd start toward. And with intermediate kayakers, you want to teach them how to do power circles, how to really paddle on edge, how to, use combination strokes, things like that, right? So there's this progression.
And now they have this solid foundation that they can just grow exponentially. Yeah.
And they just launch off, right? Well, the crazy thing is, right, like people are like, well, playboats are really bad because they're really aggressive, they're hard to paddle, and that you're going to flip a lot if you paddle a playboat, right? Like, first of all, you're going to flip a lot paddling a playboat if you're new at paddling, but also if you're playboating, you're going to flip constantly. That's why playboating makes you really good, because you're upside down almost as much as you are upright, especially if you're having fun. Like that's how it goes, right? Like, and creaking too these days, right? Like half the moves are upside down anyway. So it's kind of where the sport is, right? So learning how to paddle that way is really important. So the way I think about it is this: if you have somebody that's really athletic, the high school wrestling team kid, right? I put them in a playboat every single time and let them know,
Right at the beginning.
Very beginning, let them know, like, hey, you're probably going to flip. It's going to be a steep learning curve. You're going to be better for it. You're going to have way more fun. Just roll with it.
And they probably don't care about getting hit and taking some rocks. And yeah.
No, true story. I was in high school, taught one of the guys on my wrestling team. And so I was like, hey man, you really want to try this? And I was sponsored at the time. I was already like a sponsored kayaker and traveling around kayaking on the weekends. I was like, why don't we just go to the lake real quick? And I stuck him in my playboat and taught him how to roll in 3 attempts. I mean, he's athletic, right? Like, taught him how to roll really quickly. And then once he had it, he was like, oh, okay, I know what to do. And then he rolled perfectly from there on out.
Yeah.
The thing is, when you have kids, when you teach kids, a lot of times putting a kid in the playboat right off the bat is actually a lot of times the best way for them to progress, because they're naturally inclined to play anyway. They're naturally going to be a little bit more aggressive. They're naturally a little bit more athletic and flexible and all of those things that adults aren't, right? Like,
yeah.
So playboat makes more sense. If you take somebody who's really, really timid, my girlfriend, I'll use her as an example. She wasn't a kayaker. She was scared of water. She loved that I did it, didn't mind me kayaking. She's like, you do you. I'll drive shuttle.
Didn't get freaked out, like, hey, I'm going to go paddle class 5 or whatever?
No. Like, knew what I was doing and was fine about it. I mean, she saw a picture of me running an 80-foot waterfall like before our first date. She started more on that river runner creek because she was scared of water, right? So like that totally made sense. Like, let's get her into something that's a bomb shelter that's going to feel safe. And I even did the ultra soft start. Well, some people won't say that. I put her in a duo and took her down the Akoi. And
what? How is that a soft start?
And before long, we were doing enders and flipper. We were like, we surfed hellhole. We played in everything, and flipped everywhere. We were upside down a lot.
Like you do enders and flipper.
Yeah. The old school Dagger GTs. I don't know if you remember those. They were designed specifically for schools, for like paddling schools. I think that's why they designed that boat. I ran an instructional program at one point full of Dagger GTs, and it was a great. I mean, aside from losing lots of nuts and bolts all the time and having to like, it was, and that was just the old days.
Dagger.
That kind of just sums up like the early 2000s. But it was one of those things where the design itself was like a really good beginner design for, kids, adults, whoever, because as a paddling school, the goal is like, what can you do to get the most people in a kayak and have them have a good day and learn a lot? Right. And so for what the best first kayak is for most people is going to be, something that's in that range that's tracks pretty well. It's not, playboats don't track very well, so they don't paddle straight very easily. So you want something a little bit longer that has a little bit more of an edge, right? Maybe a little bit of a more relaxed rocker profile so that you're able to actually paddle in a straight line. But then you're also going to want something with enough volume in the bow so that the bow's not slicing into everything, right? Like if you're in a full slice or if you're in a playboat, then the bow tends to purl a lot while you're paddling and tries to, when you're trying to do a ferry, your bow just goes down and then you flip, right? Like you're still learning how to adjust your kayak side to side, and then there's front to back on top of it, right? So there's that. So figuring out a way to, have a boat have a little volume in the bow so that you can really paddle downstream well, the tracks well, but then be able to surf a wave well and stern squirt really well, right? Like those are really important skills. So being able to play in a wave, surf small waves, not big waves, right? Because you're a beginner, right? Like, so as a beginner, you want to fit into a small wave. And then you want to be able to actually maneuver around and not feel like you're going to get stuck and bogged down and things like that. So you need something that's a little shorter. So that kind of like 7 to 8 foot range tends to be really, really great, even 6 to 7 for beginners, right?
6-foot half slices?
No, but like, big playboats, like the Fun series, right? Like the Fun series is like,
yeah, that's like a river.
you know what I mean? Like it wasn't a half slice, but right, like it still kind of like matched those criteria, sort of.
Yeah, it wasn't a spud, really. It wasn't a full slice. Yeah,
right. Yeah, so it's kind of like it's kind of in between. It was made with beginners in mind, right? That was the goal. So and 7 feet's probably a good kind of like that 7 to 8 foot range for a beginner is probably going to track the best, right? That tends to be a half slice. And then being able to have that slicey stern so that you can learn how to stern squirt and balance, and that edge control that you learn when you're learning how to stern squirt is vital. A lot of people think, edges are what make a boat flippy. They make a boat like feel like it's going to flip all the time. But it's not actually the edge that does that. It's the parting line of the boat and where the parting line sits. So like the difference of the parting line is like on the parting line, like the actual edge is right here, but the parting line is actually right here. Right.
So that's what's going to grab the water.
This is what grabs the water and makes you flip, is when this goes below that line. And so the parting line is kind of where the top and the bottom of the boat kind of come together. And so on our little like foamy friend, for example, the parting line would be somewhere up here, right? There's no real good parting line on this, unfortunately. There's an edge.
Yeah.
But the parting line would kind of be up here, probably.
Actually, that shadow does show it perfectly on the pink right there.
Yeah, so you can see it there. Yeah, you can see the parting line. So that parting line, that's what causes you to flip. It's not the actual edges, right? The double drop chines on the
Yep.
If you can see it well.
That's my new favorite playboat, by the way.
Yeah, this playboat, like you've got two different edges right here, and those double drop chines are designed to release water really fast and efficiently, to be able to do things like spin and things like that. So that's not actually what makes a boat feel flip, like it's going to flip over or anything. That's not what makes them feel tippy. So as a beginner, what you want to look for is like, where's the parting line? Is it that kind of like 7 to 8 foot range so that I can paddle in a straight line if you're kind of that average beginner? Most modern boats are planing hold now. I think a lot of us realized along the way that edges are good edges, allow an extra bit of control, and they allow a boat to break free in a way that when you're turning and carving and paddling around, you want that ability to shed water. And so those edges are really, really good for that. I broke both my ankles one time when I was in high school. It was on Little River Canyon Falls.
Dude, you and Brian Storzy, good Lord.
I was cheesing for a camera, being an obnoxious teenager who had just I had been creaking all day and just didn't care. And I missed a boob stroke because I was smiling for a camera. There's a great photo of it somewhere. I was being an idiot and broke both my ankles. It was like 4,000 CFS. The eddy was just fully recircling in the middle of the river. My skirt blew. I tried paddling around with a blown skirt and tried to get out of the eddy in the middle of the river and couldn't. So then I tried to swim across the eddy line and couldn't. Then me and my boat were just recirculating and couldn't. And I was alone, sort of. My friends were up on the overlook running safety.
Anyone had a rope or anything?
No, well, they were in their gear. They were going to just come down and get me if anything happened. It was not a good plan. But yeah, the ranger obviously wouldn't let them because he showed up. I swam for like 45 minutes. Yeah, like 45 minutes into there. And it was just one of those moments, right?
With your ankles already broken?
Oh yeah, it was bad, dude. It was bad. It was bad, right? And so
Dude, is it the Little River Canyon? It's like the 35-footer where it's like the 2 tiers?
Yeah, it's maybe it's like 2 tiers, and then the top drops maybe 10 feet, and I hit the peak on the rock and broke the front of it was an old Eskimo Salto. And
those boats are supposed to be indestructible.
Oh yeah, they were supposed to be. I had a nice nose cone on mine after that. And it was just a thing, man. It was I was just happy that I was finally paddling in a creek boat, because before that I'd been creeking only in this plastic squirt boat that I had squished. I squished a full slice into a complete squirt boat that I could mystery move, and was creaking in that. And that was not very smart either, But there was a time period there. My point is, there was a time period there where convention was just really unknown. We didn't know we needed to tuck forward on waterfalls for a while, and we thought things would be a problem. And lots of people said, "Oh, that's bad." Everybody back then said worser on the Nantahala was class 6. The best way to learn edge control, rolling, to bomb-proof your roll. The idea of a bomb-proof roll is learning how to roll off of pressure. And so it's not just like a straight roll. It's learning how to feel pressure on your blades from wherever it's coming from and just hip snap off of it. And playboating teaches you that. Playboating teaches you how to just feel around and pop right up. And so learning how to do that and how to use the water to go where you want to go and to do what you want to do is vital. Learning how to use your quadrants and your edges before you go progressing into class 4 or 5 or anything like that is reason enough to just go all in, right? That's reason enough to just full on go into playboating and toward playboating. And so not everybody's fit enough, right? Not everybody is comfortable enough. And so if you're not fit enough or you're not comfortable enough, then you have a whole range of other options to give you as much of it as you're willing to take on, right? So the shorter half slices are going to take on a little bit more than the longer half slices versus the full-on creek boat. But the closer you can get to that playboating range, the faster, I think, the better your progression is going to be longer term. But it is steeper. There's a steeper learning curve involved.
Dude, giving me a lot.
Yeah, man.
Of really, really good stuff. I've been taking notes. I have a whole page of notes.
I've seen you taking notes. We've taken a lot of tangents, man. I don't know. We kind of went on a journey.
what is the best boat for beginners?
Okay, so saying what's a good boat for beginners is a misnomer, because what beginner?